Hey, I'm Jamie East, and today's episode of The Smart 7 is sponsored by Vodafone Business in partnership with Samsung. If you're running a business, any kind of business, you're probably spending some time thinking about AI, what to do, how much to use it, and how to even get started. The answer could be in your pocket. The new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, powered by Vodafone Business's reliable, award-winning network, will help you unleash your productivity through brilliant built-in Galaxy AI. For example, Note Assist will automatically correct, fix the spelling, formatting and organise your meeting notes so you can stay tuned into the session without any worry. And AI continues to make headlines. This week sees the government set to roll out a new AI-powered tool called Consult, which experts estimate could save £20 million a year and free up 75,000 hours of civil service time. So of course, they're calling it Humphrey. Huh? Getting back to the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, to take advantage of all the features and change the way you do business, you'll need a Samsung account and a network connection. To find out more, search Vodafone Business Samsung, and for network verification, go to vodafone.co.uk/network. It's Saturday the 24th of May. I'm Jamie East, and this was a week that saw the UK sign a new trade deal with the EU, tensions escalate over Israel's war in Gaza, Trump and Putin fail to agree on a ceasefire, and Spurs win the Europa League.
Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
but not the news.
This week saw Prime Minister Keir Starmer close another major trade deal, this time with the European Union. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was in London for the signing of the deal, despite negotiations going down to the wire. The Prime Minister sounded jubilant.
Britain is back on the world stage, working with our partners, doing deals that will grow our economy, and putting more money in the pockets of working people.
The deal covers fishing rights, trade, energy, and could see the UK access the new fund aimed at rearming Europe in face of Russian aggression. There are still some areas to be concluded, one of which appears to be a return to the Erasmus scheme and a plan to allow freer movement for younger people. It's also expected to see Brits allowed to use EU passport lanes to speed up European travel. The EU Commission President was sounding equally positive.
What we have agreed today is historic. It will make a real difference to people in the UK and across our union. It is a message that at a time of global instability, we in Europe stick together.
Starmer was talking up the merits of the deal, which he said would see the removal of restrictions on UK food and agriculture exports to the EU that could be worth up to £9 billion a year. That was the closest he came to mentioning Brexit, but David Frost, who is Boris Johnson's chief Brexit negotiator, was seeing the deal as a step back from the freedom of Brexit.
What it's done is shifted us very significantly back towards being a rule taker. What this is doing is ensuring that in these quite important areas for our economy, we're going to get no say.
UK fishermen weren't particularly happy, and neither was Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, who was worried that the EU deal might impact the US trade deal. The general business reaction was positive, however, with the British Chamber of Commerce welcoming the potential lifting of so-called Brexit checks. Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary also sounded cheery.
Great news. I mean, look, anything that encourages closer trading ties between the UK and Europe is to be welcomed. It won't make much difference to the European economy, but it can really transform the UK economy.
Tuesday saw the PM present the details to the House of Commons, and former Brexiteers were out in force, with the exception of Reform leader Nigel Farage, who's on holiday, presumably not in Europe. He tweeted that the new deal's a surrender agreement, but didn't appear for the debate, while Kemi Badenoch was unimpressed by the PM's deal-making streak.
When Labour negotiates, Britain loses. He talks about a hat-trick of deals. They are own goals.
Minister for EU Relations Nick Thomas-Symonds, who helped negotiate the deal, had no concerns about the Brexit hornet's nest that the deal appears to have stirred up.
Support for this deal across a range of businesses, and that wide support is there because this is a deal that is in our economic interests and is going to be advantageous economically up and down the country.
Last weekend saw the strange juxtaposition of Israel coming second in the Eurovision Song Contest on Saturday, while on Sunday their military began what they called extensive new ground operations in Gaza. The announcement sparked protests. Labour MP Rosina Alin Khan said it's not just the new assault, it's the fact that the ongoing blockade has seen no food, fuel or aid enter Gaza for 11 weeks.
Food is being used as a weapon of war. We have children who have already died from having food withheld.
Sunday night saw the Israeli government announce that a basic level of food will now be allowed in while negotiations continue in Doha. But that turned out to mean allowing just 5 trucks with supplies, including baby food, into the Palestinian territory. That was described as a drop in the ocean by the UN's humanitarian chief, as he warned that over 2 million people remain at risk of a looming famine. Israeli PM Netanyahu insisted that plans for new food hubs are still underway. He also had a grim warning for residents of Gaza.
We are conducting an immense, intense and tremendous battle. There is progress. We are going to take control of the entire territory of the Gaza Strip. We are not giving up, but we must do this in a way that they won't stop us.
Pressure continued to mount on Israel on Tuesday as there was no sign of that aid arriving. The UN was warning that up to 14,000 babies are at risk of death. And the leader of the Israeli centre-left Democrats says his country is in danger of becoming a pariah nation that kills babies as a hobby. Speaking in Parliament, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer condemned Israel's refusal to help the 2 million people in dire need.
Well, the situation is intolerable and unacceptable, and that's why over the last 3 or 4 days I've been talking to leaders of other countries. Humanitarian aid needs to get in at pace.
The lack of aid led the UK to end its trade talks with Israel, and Foreign Secretary David Lammy condemned their failure to act.
Netanyahu's government is planning to drive Gazans from their homes and permit them a fraction of the aid that they need. We must call this what it is. It is extremism. It is monstrous, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
Wednesday saw Israeli troops fire warning shots over a group of diplomats from Italy, Egypt and the UK in the West Bank as tensions continue to mount. While no one was hurt, several countries summoned their respective Israeli ambassadors to explain the incident. Netanyahu's colleague Michael Kleiner says Hamas are causing the delay in aid delivery.
We want to do as much as possible to prevent the possibility that Hamas will take over the food from, and we want to ensure it will reach the population.
There was a shocking incident early on Thursday morning in Washington as 2 Israeli embassy staff members were shot dead by a man who police have apprehended. US President Donald Trump said he was saddened and outraged by the incident, while US Attorney General Pam Bondi called for all sides to calm the rhetoric.
They walked outside to go home and were gunned down. That cannot happen in our community. And this is the day where we all need to come together, no matter what religion we are.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was furious over the attack and chose to attack those who had criticised Israelis' plans to expand the war in Gaza.
I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
Some of us are old enough to remember when Donald Trump promised to end Russia's war on Ukraine in 24 hours. But despite his efforts, the war's dragging on, with Ukrainian President Zelensky getting most of the blame despite the fact that Russia started the war. Monday saw Trump and Putin hold a more than 2-hour phone call. Trump claimed on Truth Social that the tone and spirit of the call was excellent, and he made a round of phone calls to European leaders and Zelensky afterwards. But the progress report was that talks about a ceasefire would begin soon, and Russian President Putin was back to his usual delaying tactics.
Russia will propose a memorandum on a possible future peace treaty defining several points, such as the terms of a possible conclusion of the peace agreement, including a possible ceasefire for a certain period of time if appropriate agreements are reached.
Ukrainian President Zelensky accused Russia of buying time to try and continue the war. The EU launched a fresh wave of sanctions on Russia, focusing on Russia's so-called shadow fleet of oil tankers, and the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas called for the US to wade in with strong action if no ceasefire is forthcoming. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio was promising more aid for Ukraine, including requesting European allies to send Patriot batteries. But it's clear that Donald Trump's appetite for a ceasefire is waning. Former Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy told Radio 4 that Trump deserves praise for his efforts.
He's willing to take the risk that no one else is doing right now to try to end war and criticize him because he didn't do it in 24 hours. I think you're wrong. And I applaud President Trump for using the leadership to do it, and I, with other leaders, would join with him.
Thursday saw new German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in Lithuania to officially inaugurate a new German tank brigade that'll be permanently stationed on NATO's eastern flank. It's the first deployment of German troops abroad since the Second World War and demonstrates how seriously NATO are taking the growing Russian threat, as NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte reiterated.
The Russians are reconstituting themselves much faster than we feared. They are now producing, in terms of ammunition, in 3 months what the whole of NATO is producing in a year. And that is why ramping up production is really crucial and getting the innovation going.
As the new Labour government's battled to get the economy back on track, some of the early changes they made have haunted them. One in particular was the changes to winter fuel allowances for pensioners, which sparked acres of coverage and gave opposition parties a stick to beat them with. After a by-election loss to Reform and a poor local election campaign, Number 10 have decided to do a U-turn on the fuel allowance cuts, but it's not clear how that's going to work. Prime Minister Keir Starmer was keen to credit the improving economy for the change.
I recognise that people are still feeling the pressure of the cost of living crisis, and as the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements, and that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments.
Wednesday saw bad news on the inflation front as the after effects of what was awful April became clear. The month just gone saw rises in gas, electricity, water and transport, which saw the figure rise to 3.5% from 2.6% in March. Chancellor Rachel Reeves wasn't happy, but can't have been that surprised.
The numbers today are clearly disappointing. We want to see inflation coming down. Clearly we're in a different place to where we were under the previous government, but we recognise the cost of living is still a challenge.
The Bank of England's been warning that inflation's expected to peak during the summer and then decline, but Tory Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride wasn't sounding too sympathetic.
If you put up national insurance, if you borrow to the extent that they have and spend to the extent that they have, then this, I'm afraid, is what happens. But I think they've got themselves into a very tight spot, and that is costing all of us.
With the UK's prisons at 99% capacity, there was some urgency to the government's sentencing review, which was published on Thursday. The review was conducted by former Justice Secretary David Gauke, who says that overcrowding could be substantially reduced if his recommendations are followed. The most radical suggestion is to offer chemical castration to suppress the sexual drive of sex offenders, something that's already been trialled in southwest England. There are also recommendations to scrap shorter sentences and make more use of community orders.
I think we can move quickly in terms of the rollout of technology. The measures that we are setting out need to be implemented by next spring if we are to avoid the capacity crisis.
The government's also set to invest £700 million in supporting the probation service, but Tory Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick doesn't agree with the report's recommendations.
He could have bring forward emergency measures to get the 17,500 people who are currently in prison through the system faster, but he hasn't. Instead, he's putting the public in danger, and there's a get-out-of-jail-free card for criminals.
The government also signed the controversial Chagos Island deal, despite a last-ditch injunction filed by two Chagosians, which was overturned. The deal will see the UK hand ownership of the islands over to Mauritius, but in exchange for sovereignty, the US and UK will be granted a 99-year lease for the Diego Garcia military base on the islands. The deal will cost an estimated £3.4 billion over that time, and the Conservatives describe the deal as an act of national self-harm. Keir Starmer, however, hit back at the criticism from the Tories and Reform during a press conference and emphasised the importance of the base for the UK's security.
The strategic location of this base is of the utmost significance to Britain. From deploying aircraft to defeat terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan, to anticipating threats, the base is right at the foundation of our security and safety at home.
Still to come on the Standout 7 in association with Metro, Spurs break a 17-year losing streak and Simon Pegg spills the tea on Tom Cruise. Right after this.
Hey, it's Jamie East here, and today's episode of The Smart 7 is sponsored by Vodafone Business in partnership with Samsung. When you're running your own business, pretty much anywhere can be your office. The spare room, the back garden, or, even the local cafe. And with the power of Vodafone Business's reliable award-winning network, combined with the new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, there's no limit to what you can do pretty much anywhere. For example, if you're working and caffeinating at the same time, the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra will allow you to seamlessly complete actions across a whole range of apps to find relevant information and send it where it needs to go. It can even summarise YouTube videos for you and save it to Samsung Text Notes. That's the power of AI in your pocket. And AI continues to make headlines. This week sees the government set to roll out a new AI-powered tool called Consult, which experts estimate could save £20 million a year and free up 75,000 hours of civil service time. So, of course, they're calling it Humphrey. Huh? And getting back to Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, to take advantage of all the features and change the way you do business, you'll need a Samsung account and a network connection. And if you're using the seamless action across apps, it's compatible with selected languages only. You'll also need a Google account login, and the availability of search functions may vary by country, language and device. To find out more, search Vodafone Business Samsung, and for network verification, go to vodafone.co.uk/network.
Welcome back.
Last Sunday saw voters in Poland, Portugal and Romania head to the polling stations. Poland was holding the first round of its presidential elections, while Portuguese voters turned out for the third snap general election in 3 years. The Romanian presidential election was in its second round, with a populist pro-Trump candidate George Simion, a former soccer hooligan, hoping to beat centrist mayor of Budapest Nicolae Dan. There was a high turnout in Romania, and the EU leadership was relieved that Dan pulled off a victory, winning with 54% and promising to build a Romania for all.
This is your victory. Those of you who believed in the right change for Romania, those that campaigned and spoke on social networks, you didn't fear hate speech, you showed what was true.
This Sunday sees not just the Premier League season wrap-up, but also the Lineker era of Match of the Day. Gary's BBC retirement appears to have been hurried up by some unwise posting last week, which saw him accused of anti-Semitism. So, he's off this Sunday earlier than expected and will miss next summer's World Cup, but, he's 64 and has a podcast empire on the side, so put those violins away. He posted a suitably apologetic farewell on Insta on Monday.
Last week, I shared a post here on Instagram that contained an emoji that has awful connotations. I've stood up for minorities and humanitarian issues and against all forms of racism all of my life. So I think it's best for all concerned that I step down from BBC presenting duties altogether.
Staying with sport, Wednesday night saw two of the worst Premier League teams this season contest a cup final in Europe. It's been a strange season for both Man United and Spurs, but somehow they ended up facing off against each other in Bilbao for the Europa League title. The bald man comb fighting contest saw Spurs take the lead just before half-time, and the second half saw relentless United pressure, but it just wasn't enough, and the game finished 1-0 to Tottenham Hotspur. That makes them Europa League champions, the first trophy for the club in 17 years, and it delighted manager Ange Postecoglou, who delivered on his trophy in the second year promise.
I know what it means to the football club, I know what it means to supporters, and look, it's no secret we've had a tough year, but I've just had this thing inside me, like I said, I know what it means to the club, it's had the tag of sort of a nearly team for a long time, and the only way you break that is by winning things, and we did that today.
We're definitely heading towards the summer blockbuster season, and we did warn you that there was about to be a lot of Tom Cruise content. The man's been everywhere, from Cannes to Absolute Radio's breakfast show. The final Mission Impossible, called Final Reckoning, hit the cinemas this weekend, and longtime co-star Simon Pegg got some airtime away from Tom as he popped up on The Tonight Show. He revealed that once he got fit, Tom used to call him 8-pack Peggles. And that being buddies with Mr. Cruise is quite a lot of work.
I had to mow a landing pad into my garden so he could come around for a cup of tea. It was like, and the chopper landed and we all greeted him, hello, boss. And he came in and he's hung around and we had a cup of tea. And then he said to my wife and my daughter, hey, you want to come for a spin around London? And they were like, no.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day.
Give us 7 minutes and we'll give you the world.
Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court, and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common-sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.